Katniss becomes the symbol of the rebellion as she tries to save Peeta from the Capitol and stop President Snow's tyranny. This is my review of Mockingjay. Before I went to go see Mockingjay Part 1 in theaters, I reread the book Mockingjay, and it was my third time rereading it because a year before this I reread the entire series in like a span of a week. And after rereading Mockingjay for a third time, I have to tell you guys that I thought that the book was still really great, in my opinion. The good points. So I think I've said this for the past two books, but I think the best part of Mockingjay was the writing by Susan Collins. And there's this one complaint that a lot of people had about the final book, and I get where they're coming from, but in my opinion, I thought that this complaint wasn't really bad at all. I was angry at points because of this complaint, but I think this complaint helped with this certain character, and that character was Katniss. Yeah, a lot of people said that her character in the book was depressing and she did a lot of stupid things throughout the book. And I can see where people are getting mad about that, but I think you have to keep in mind about the past events of the past two books. Because those events from those two past books are what made this character of Katniss that we have right now in Mockingjay. And I also try to picture myself in Katniss's shoes, like if those events from the past two books happened to me, and the events in this book happened to me as well. Like, I was trying to wonder, like, what would I feel? And I would have felt some of the emotions that Katniss felt. Plus, I would have done some of the things that she did also. So I get where people are coming from, where they're having that as a complaint, but for me it wasn't a big deal. Because to me, it was basically just the evolution of a character, or a character being developed even more. Alright, let's get into the best thing that Susan Collins did with her writing. Yeah, so the best thing that she did with her writing was with the surprises. I mean, man, the surprises were, well, surprising, and they were heartbreaking at the same time for some of them. For instance, when this one huge surprise happened, like, I was like, oh my god, what's going on right now? And when this other surprise happened, I was like, oh no, what? And I was like almost starting to cry and I had to close my book. But I'll talk about those surprises later on in the spoiler section. Another thing that I liked about the book was that Collins transitioned from the games side of this series into the war side of the series. And that's another strange complaint that some people have, was that, oh my god, there was like no games in the book. And I was thinking to myself in my head, like, well, there's a war going on and you can't really have games when there's a war going on. But anyways, in the first half of the book, I liked how it was focusing on the propaganda that District 13 was making. And I liked how the first half of the book was talking about the politics and the war as well. Because you feel like with all three of those elements, the propaganda, the politics, and the war, that you're behind the scenes of this like war machine. Then I liked how it transitioned from the first half of the book, which was about the propaganda, politics, and war, into the second half, which was mainly more about the war and about the politics. And during the first and second halves of this book, I liked how the characters were involved. You have Katniss in the first half of the book doing like the propaganda, since she's the face of the rebellion. And you can tell just by reading it that she's not really good at all. But she eventually becomes better as she goes along. And I liked how the characters were used in the book and how they ended up in the book, because it just shows you what war can do to a person. Which I think is one of the themes of the book as well. And there are several other themes that I like in the book, but this other theme that I like was with the politics. Because it's reminiscent to today's politics in a way. And it's reminiscent of politics from the past as well. And this theme shows how politics can mask up a person's personality. The bad points. There's one thing I didn't like about the book, and that one thing would have to be the third act of it. And the reason for that is because of the pacing. But overall, I thought the third act was good. I just thought that there were moments in the third act where it's like, yeah, the pacing seems weird over here, and towards the end. And it was not in a way where Collins was writing the book like, oh my god, I don't know what to do, I need to write stuff. But it was in a way where it's like, for example, let's say that this is like the normal pace, and that's how it needed to be in the third act in some parts. But instead, it was either just a little bit like a notch higher or like a notch lower. But yeah, that's my one complaint I have about the book. Okay, so my rating for Mockingjay is going to be a 3.75 out of 4 stars. I couldn't get it to 4 stars because of that one bad point, which was the pacing in the third act. I thought it was weird. But for the other aspects, such as the writing by Suzanne Collins, the characters, the development, the surprises, the themes of the book, I thought they were done well. Alright, spoilers for Mockingjay. If you haven't read this book yet, then get over now because I'm going to be spoiling the surprises, whether they were big or small. And I don't know why you would want to hear these big or small surprises because they're surprising. So please, get over now if you want to be surprised still. Okay, so where to start? Well, I guess we can go in chronological order. And that means that we can start off with the first surprise of PETA. Yeah, so the rescue mission was successful. They got PETA back to the infirmary along with the other victors as well. And then Katniss goes to greet PETA, and then PETA, out of nowhere, attacks Katniss. And like, whoa, what's going on here? And then I was thinking in my mind, either he was brainwashed or that wasn't PETA at all. And yep, found out a few seconds later that PETA was being brainwashed with Tracker Jacker serum. And when I was reading this for the first time, I was like, oh yeah, they purposely had the rebellion rescue PETA so that he could kill Katniss. Then the next small surprise would have to be PETA going to the camp where the rebellion is posted outside of the capital city. Because when I was reading it, and when I read that PETA was there, I was like, wait, why is PETA there? And then Katniss had a conversation with Boggs, and then they were talking about how Coin was probably doing this to try to kill Katniss so that she won't become some sort of like political figure in the future. I'm like, oh my god, are you serious? And it looks like that was Coin's plan because PETA tries to kill her later on when they're in the city. The next surprise, and this is the first heartbreaking surprise, and that was when Finnick died. Yeah, Finnick, man. When I read that the reptile thing was biting down on Finnick's like collarbone area right here, I was like, no, what? Like I had my eyes watering, and my eyes are running right now just thinking about it. And that's another complaint some people had, was the deaths, because of how sad they were or something. And I was like, well, okay, I can get your attachment to these characters, but I think Suzanne Collins is trying to make this story as realistic as possible. And in real life war, like, not everyone that you like can make it out. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And Finnick was unfortunately one of those people that didn't make it out of the war. And I was hoping that Finnick was still alive, but after Katniss threw that communicuff down the manhole, I was like, yeah, he's dead. And then she closed the cover, and I was like, yep, he's dead. Man. I couldn't read the book for a few minutes. Like, I had to close it and, like, think about it for a second and then start reading again. And then, like, 30 pages later or whatever, we see that Katniss and others are going towards the center of the capital in this huge space. And then, all of a sudden, like, there are these bombers overhead. And then Katniss sees out of the blue Prim attending to, like, these injured people. And then I was like, oh my god, no. And then the bombs fell. Prim got engulfed by the fire, and so did Katniss. And I was like, oh, what? And then we found out in the next chapter that Prim died, and I was like, no. And keep in mind that these are reactions to the first time I read the book. But anyways, I had to close the book, and I got up, and I was pacing back and forth a little bit, and then I sat down again. I was like, oh my god, that is just terrible. And by that, I mean it's terrible for Katniss. But then, chapter 2 later, Katniss has this conversation with Snow, and then Snow's like, I didn't send those bombers to kill my people. And then Katniss doesn't believe him, and then Snow says that it was probably Coin that did it, and Katniss still doesn't believe him. And then Snow said that he promised that he would never lie to her from the first or second book, I believe. Yeah, it was in the second book where he said that he would never lie to her. And I was like, no, like, Snow's just trying to get out of something that he did. But then I was starting to think about it, and I was like, no, Coin wouldn't do something like that. And then I was thinking about it more and more, and I was like, well, she sent PETA in to try to kill her, most likely. And then when I was starting to think about it more and more, I was like, oh my gosh, she possibly did it. Next, we have the small surprise with Snow's execution, his public execution, and that's not the small surprise, but what happens next is the small surprise, because I sort of knew that coin, like after what Snow said, I knew that coin was going to die. But I didn't know if it was going to be by either Katniss or someone from the Capitol or anyone else. And before her death, I was sort of thinking that it was going to be someone else that was going to kill Coin out of nowhere. But no, the small surprise happened, and it was Katniss who turned her bow and arrow towards Coin and shot the arrow at her, and then she died. Then really from that moment on, the rest of the book is depressing, but that's the way that it has to happen, really, because Suzanne Collins, again, is trying to make this book realistic as possible. And some people may say that, no, that's not realistic, but it's like, okay, well, try to think about her mindset and try to think about the events that she just went through in probably just one day. I think anyone in her shoes would most likely snap as well, or like go even more crazy. But yeah, we find out when she's back at District 12 that Gale is probably not going to come back because he has this new job with the new government. And then in a letter, we found out that Katniss's mom doesn't want to come back. It was like, no, wait, what? You don't want to come back? Please, don't leave your only daughter. But then when I was thinking about it, I was like, no, actually, like, maybe Katniss can visit her mother or something. But yeah, she doesn't want to go back to District 12 because it reminds her too much of Prim. Then Peeta comes back, and then it seems like Peeta's okay now. Then it looks like that Peeta and Katniss are having a relationship again, and in the epilogue we find out that Peeta and Katniss have children. And I can't remember the last line, but whatever the last line of the book was, I liked the last line because it felt like a perfect ending for it. So yeah, that's my review for Mockingjay. Hope you guys liked it, and other than that, guys, that's it.